a Ketz that the Alter Rebbe made. In other words, everybody knows that historically there have been numerous Gedolei Yisrael who gave Ketzin. In other words, predicted dates of the coming of Moshiach. Rab Sadia Gaon and the Rambam and the Ramban and the Rabbeinu B'chaya. All the greatest of the great predicted Ketzin for the coming of Moshiach. The Alter Rebbe has a Ketz. And when we were kids growing up, we heard the Maimer V'Sa'elef V'Chamesh Meiz V'Chamisha V'Shivim, the Alter Rebbe's Ketz. The story goes, however, that when the Alter Rebbe actually said the year, he said a different year. He made a whole mathematical cheshbon that's supposed to add up to a particular year, and then he blurted out a different year. I don't know what that other year was. That's not according to the cheshbon, because in the printed version, you only have the Ketz that goes according to the mathematics. The Alter Rebbe's Ketz was Tafresh Gimel, 1843. And if I'm not wrong, the year that he said was Tafresh Samach Vav, 1906. Tafresh Samach Vav was a Ketz. But today, we live in an age where Maimorim, that for 200 years people talked about and never dreamed of seeing, and this Maimer with the Alter Rebbe's Ketz is published in a book. It was printed 20 years ago, and before 20 years ago, the only people who ever saw the Maimer were the Rabbeim. And the Hasidim knew about it because one of the Rabbeim once mentioned the Maimer V'Sa'elef V'Chamesh Meiz V'Shivim Meiz V'Chamisha V'Shivim Asavav V'Lamudim. So I had a curiosity. I wanted to learn this Maimer, and I knew that myself, I don't have time to learn anything. So I have to find an excuse to learn it, which means I have to teach it. So I decided to do it with this class. But I started with an initial trepidation. What if I don't find enough material on this Possuk? I mean, this Possuk is so benign. It's so unprovocative. In other words, Rashi doesn't say anything. I mean, there's nothing to say on this Possuk. 3/4 of Possuk and Pashas because they have zero Rashi. It's like Vayakhel. And the Eibush Geholfen, I started to research. The Zohar was very generous. The Alter Rebbe was quite generous. There's a Magal HaMukis. We have, don't worry, an hour of material, we for sure have. Could we stretch it to 2 hours? I doubt it. We'll see what we're going to do. I prepared already the first draft. I already prepared the copies for Tuesday night's class. It's on the Possuk by Yeraku. It's Pache HaZohav, which is Kapitel Lamites Possuk Gimel. And there I have even less material than I have here. So this is the history of the preparation to this class. It's one of those issues where it's interesting, it's fun. What's interesting and fun about it is you pick a Possuk in Torah and you assume that there's nothing anybody could say about the Possuk, and then you put your goggles on and you go under the water and you see a coral reef. You understand, with the most colorful fish in the world. That's how Torah works. You cannot find a Possuk in Torah that doesn't stimulate, that doesn't have so much depth. You have to just look. And I looked. Had help. I have some tricks up my sleeve. I'm not alone in this business. There's a sefer which tells you every Possuk where to look in every sefer. And it's called Beis Adad. It was made by the Rebbe's grandfather, Rebbe Ram David Lavut. And this time I went to the bottom of the barrel. I had to really scratch. But we have no shortage of material for tonight. For Tuesday, we'll see. Now, let me introduce the class. Now that I introduced the introduction. Parshas Pekudei begins with accounting. Okay, Parshas Pekudei always happens within 6 weeks of April 15th. I don't know if that's true or false, but so you have to, 2 months or whatever it is, it's already tax season. So Parshas Pekudei begins with an accounting. Eile Pekudei HaMishkan. This is the accountant. The Torah does accounting. And it calculates the precise value of gold, silver, and copper invested in the Mishkan. It says that they had gold that was 29 kikar and change, 29 kikar. A kikar zav is 3,000 gold coins of gold, 29 and change. They had 100 kikar of silver and change, and they had 70 kikar of copper and change. The Torah does not calculate how much wool they use, doesn't calculate how much wood they use. It calculates only the gold, the silver, and the copper. But each calculation has other oddities about it, which are striking. Number one, When it comes to gold, the Torah says they had 29 kikar plus of gold. It does not mention what it was used for. It just says they used it in the Mishkan. We know what they used it for, but the Torah does not enumerate. It was used for the Aron, for the Shulchan, for the Menorah, for the Inner Mizbeach, for the walls of the Mishkan itself. They were gilded, they were covered with gold. And that's it. When it comes to copper, the Torah enumerates the 70 kikar plus of copper and enumerates precisely what they were used for. And skips, who remembers? The kiyar is missing. So the Mefarshim tell us because the kiyar was not included in the calculation of the copper. The kiyar was made from the mirrors, the copper mirrors, which is a separate cheshbon. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to have to get the tape. And if you have access to the tape, which means you have to buy it from Ariella, you have to wait till next year when it goes on the internet. It's not going on the internet this year. When it comes to silver, the Torah enumerates everything that the silver was used for, everything. They raised 100 kikar plus. Kikar is 3,000 coins, weight of coins of silver, plus a little bit more than a half. A kikar is 3,000 gold coins. They raised 100,000 gold coins. 300,000 gold coins, which adds up to 100 kikar, and another 1,775 coins of silver, and the Possuk indicates precisely what the silver was used for. In other words, gold, the Possuk enumerates that they had so many kikar of gold, doesn't tell us at all how the gold was distributed. Copper, the Torah tells us we had 70 and change kikar of copper, tells us what it was used for, deletes the kiyar, because the kiyar was made with separate copper, with the copper from the mirrors. And one of the Mefarshim told us last week that what happened was they ran out of copper and they made an announcement, we're copper short, there was no more copper in the camp, and the women brought their mirrors. Well, it was one of the many interpretations we had last week. When it comes to silver, the Torah enumerates precisely what the silver was used for. 100 kikar, which is 300,000 gold coins of silver, was used for the 100 Adonim. Adonim were solid metal bases. They were very heavy. They sat on the ground. They were about this large, with a hole in the center, and the krushim were placed in two of them. And they were so heavy that they could support the krushim were very tall. The vertical tendency of something which is large, it held in a place, was very heavy. It was a foundation. It was a foundation above the ground made of silver. And there was a little bit of change. 1,775 coins of silver, which we're going to discover momentarily what it was used for. Now, before we continue, one of the great questions in the commentaries is, did they raise exactly that much gold, exactly that much silver, exactly that much copper, and there was nothing else? Or did they raise more gold, more silver, more copper? In other words, is the Torah calculating, is the Torah giving us an accounting of how much they raised, or did they actually raise much more? But the Torah is calculating what was used in the building of the Mishkan as opposed to the residuals. In other words, we know that there was many other uses for gold and silver in the Beis HaMikdash. They made the Kelim, there were all kinds of vessels, they needed innumerable, many different, pass it down please, they needed many different, thank you very much, many different utensils for various purposes of gold, of silver. You know, I mentioned this to you on a previous occasion, that the Chazal describe at a Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash. At a Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash was, to call it a market is an understatement. The only way to describe it is at a Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash. Millions of Jews brought karbanos, millions. Everybody had to come in 6 hours, or whatever it is, 4.5 hours. It was a very short period of time. So everything was done with unbelievable efficiency. And they didn't use machines, they used only people. So there was a very sophisticated system of passing things along. So they were shechting karbanos, Pesach in one place, gathering the blood as karbanos, sending them to the Mizbeach. But the way they sent them to the Mizbeach was they had shudas, a whole row of kohanim, and the kohanim were doing this all day. They stood in one spot, taking and giving. In other words, the empty ones were coming back, the full ones were going. If you take a full one and a whole day. And the speed was so efficient that they were literally doing two things at one time constantly, and not one drop of blood spilled, because the kohanim was the reason. They were very had a lot of alacrity. They were very efficient and quick and concentrating. So the Rashi Chazal say like this: there were Shudosh Bazichi Zohov and Shudosh Bazichi Kesef. There were rows of Kohanim who were exchanging silver goblets, and there were rows of Kohanim exchanging gold ones, but they were not mixed. It should be beautiful. Everything about the Beis Mikdash had to be gorgeous. So they needed more gold, because as many vessels as they had for blood, they could have used more. They had, the Beis Mikdash had spares. They had a backup shulchan, they had a backup mizbeach. The only thing which didn't have reserve was the Holy Ark. Adonai Kodesh can't make more kruvim. That would be very serious. But there were backups, sure. They would become tamei. You had to take them and tovel them and replace them. It was a whole big deal. So there were more uses. Sorry? Even the Mishkan. The Mishkan was over people. You're talking about several million people. I mean, how the Mishkan functioned is beyond anybody's imagination. It was a tiny mizbeach. Tiny mizbeach. And in the midbar, you can only eat meat if you bought a carbon. In Israel, you have what's called basar, basar heter. You go to a butcher, you buy meat. In the midbar, if you wanted to eat meat which was shechted, you had to make a carbon. That was it. So how does one mizbeach, which was less area than the length of this table, with 5 amas by 5 amas, provide possibility for millions of people to shecht and bring karbanos? There were certain karbanos they didn't bring, but still it was very crowded. And there were only 5 kohanim to top it all off. I mean, those kohanim didn't have any rest day or night. Nadav and Aviv, Elazar, Yisama, and then 2 of them died. And Aaron HaKohen, and they were really waiting for their begottens to grow up. They needed all the help they could use. Later on, they had to divide up the responsibilities, but initially there were a handful of kohanim. In any case, so they had other uses for gold and silver. So the Mefarshim debate this. Some of the Mefarshim say that this is the precise amount of gold and silver that they raised. And it matched. The Eibishter made Bashgach al Yoina that the precise amount of gold they collected was the precise amount of gold they needed. Others say that no, they raised actually much more gold, much more silver, and possibly more copper. But the Torah is not giving us an accounting of what they collected. The Torah is giving us an accounting of what they invested in the Mishkan proper, down to the nickel, down to the penny. And of course, the most basic, the most simple explanation for why this was done was for the sake of integrity. Right? To show, the books are open. Everybody could see what's going on. It was all transparent. There's halachas about tzedakah. That the din of tzedakah is that you cannot collect tzedakah with less than 2 people. You're not allowed to distribute the tzedakah with less than 3 people. That's the din. If a person has a bank account of tzedakah and he's the only one with access to the account, it's heipach halacha. It's heipach halacha. There has to be 2 people together raising the money, and 3 people have to have access to all the accounts, to every number. It's a very interesting halacha which many people are not aware of, but it's a din in Shulchan Aruch. This is not exotic or mystical. This is a din in Torah. Nobody can trust himself when it comes to money. I can tell you that from personal experience. And the Torah says when it comes to tzedakah, you have to have 3 people have access to the accounts. Doesn't matter how pious a person is, minimum. But then the halacha is that a guy by tzedakah cannot be constantly second guessed. You have to trust him. In good faith, he can come along and say, I want to open my books. Moshe Rabbeinu opened the books and look. So on our Possuk, which is the theme of tonight's class, there's a very strange medrash. And this medrash becomes the basis for quite a discussion. So without any further ado, let's begin at the very top of page 1. Okay? The gold is missing. It's on the previous page in my Chumash. But I told you that they raised 29 kikar and change of gold. And the Torah does not indicate at all what the gold was used for. And most of the Mefarshim say because gold wasn't used that much, although the walls were gilded and the kelim were gilded. And in Possuk Chav Hey it says, V'chesef pekudei ha'eda, and the silver of the pekudei, of the counting of the community, was ma'as kikar, 100 kikar. According to Rashi, a kikar is 3,000 gold coin. Here's a whole cheshbon of how much a kikar is, and he holds real that a kikar is actually 1,500 gold coins, but shekel HaKodesh, the holy coins were double, so it was 3,000 gold coins. There's a whole cheshbon that it was 25 moneh, which is 100. A whole cheshbon how he figures out that it's 3,000 coins. So they raised 300,000 silver coins, which is a lot of silver coins. That's 600,000 half silver coins. 600,000 machzah shekel. And these 300,000 silver coins became 100 adanim. A kikar of 3,000 silver coins was the weight of one of the basins, one of the foundation pieces of the Mishkan. Okay? Ve'elef u'shva'meyais ve'chamisha ve'shivim shekel b'shekel kiddush. And 1,775 coins in the holy coins. In other words, they had 600,000 half shekels, which is 300,000 whole shekels, and then another 3,000.
That would be shekel HaKodesh.
That's double. In other words, instead of being 1,500, it's 3,000. And another 3,550 half shekels. 3,550 half shekels becomes 1,775 whole shekels. That's the way, whole coins. Okay? Now, Bekel HaGagelis, it was of course 1 coin per head. Machtes HaShekel b'Shekel Kedesh, a half shekel in the holy shekels. Anybody who was counted, Ben Esrim Shan of a Mila from 20 years and up. So if you have L'Sheish Meyes Elef, 600,000 people, U'Shleishis Lafim, and 3,000 more, V'Chamesh Meyes V'Chamishim, and 550, so 600,000 people is 600,000 half shekels, which is 300,000 whole shekels. 300,000 whole shekels is 100 adanim. And the other 3,550 becomes 1,775. Vayehi. Ma'az kikar kesef. The 100 coins of silver became lotzekes, to melt and to pour into a mold, eis adne hakodesh, the foundations of holiness. In other words, of the Mishkan. Veis adne hapareches, the foundations of the 4 pillars of the pareches. Ma'as adonim, 100 foundations. Lema'asa kikar, for 100 kikar. Again, each kikar is 3,000 silver coins. Kikar la'adin. 3,000 coins of silver were invested in each one of these foundations. They were very, very heavy. They were solid silver. They were very heavy. The Mishkan was made of wood, and apparently metal is denser than wood. It's much heavier. So the Mishkan's walls were 10 amas, which is, let's say, 16, 17 feet. The Adanim stood about 19 and a half inches. But they were so heavy that they were a very, very useful foundation for these very, very tall walls. And then it says, Ve'asa elef, u'shvahameyes, ve'chamisha v'shivim. And the remaining 1,775 coins of silver, also vovim la'amudim. They made hooks for the amudim. V'tzipar ha'shehim. They covered the heads of these amudim with silver. V'chishak oisam, and they were draped in silver. They were gattled. They were wrapped in silver like a snake that crawls around a log, a tree. I don't know for sure, but this is my understanding. The Mishkan was made of wood, covered in gold. Says the Chumash. The Chotzer, the courtyard, had pillars. And in all the pictures, they make the pillars round as opposed to rectangular. I don't know why, but this is how they're making round pillars. These pillars were, it's a little bit of a debate, but according to Pshita Shemikah, 5 amas tall, but 8 amas, 8 feet high. And they were not covered. They were wood. They were wood. The pillars that held up the kloyim, as they were called, the curtains that demarked the chotzer, were made of wood, and they were not covered. They sat in copper foundations. The foundations were copper, and I figured the copper was pretty heavy, just like the silver was pretty heavy. That's what most of the 70 kikar of copper was, the foundations to hold these beams. But remember, these beams were not 10 amas tall, which would be 16 or 17 feet high. They were in Pshut HaShemekah 5 amas tall. So they weren't as heavy, and they probably weren't as wide. They were probably thinner. And they sat in these copper foundations, which were also very solid, and they held them in place. And they also had strings which ran, strings with pegs, Mesodim and Yesedus, that kept everything steady and sturdy. But these pieces of wood that were not covered were decorated. They had caps of silver, the top was silver, and silver ran around it like a snake. Little strips of silver ran around it. If you look in the pictures, they make them like rings. A bunch of individual rings of silver that surrounded them. So the very tops of these amudim, the very tops of these pillars were silver. They were capped with silver. They also had rings that are called chashukim. Chashukim means gatlach, rings of silver. And vavim. Vavim means hooks. At the top of each one of these beams, there was a silver hook. Now, the silver hook had to be solid. It couldn't be flimsy. It had to be very strong. It was a big silver hook. Because these silver hooks, each held a cross beam. The kloyim were supported by these beams that were about this big, about an amma long, like this here, and they had a hole in the center. They would hang the cross beam on this hook. But before they hung the cross beam on the hook, they would wrap the top of the kloyim around it. The kloyim were a curtain. The chotzer was not surrounded by a wall. It was surrounded by a machitza, by a curtain. Okay? And the curtain had to be kept up and taut. It had to be pretty. It couldn't be like the machitza in the bungalow colony that moves in the wind. It had to look pretty. It had to be sturdy. It had to be tight. So they took the top of the kloyim and wrapped them around these cross beams, and then they hung the cross beams on the hook. And the hook came from the vertical beam, the middle of which was going straight up and down, and it went through the center of this beam, which was horizontal. It went this way, and by holding the beam, it held the kloyim. At the bottom, they would tie the kloyim to pegs that were fastened in the ground, so it was kept sturdy and solid and stretched out, top and bottom. This was the design. And the amudim were spaced 5 amas, which is about 7 or 8 feet apart. This was the design. So the silver that was left over had no other uses in the entire Mishkan, besides for these 3 things. There was silver used as fasteners, as foundations for the crushing, and that was it. None of the kelim were made of silver. Most of the kelim were made of gold. The mizbeach was made of copper. The key was made of copper. Okay? The only other use for silver was to decorate the beams that supported the climb of the chassid. They had caps and they had gowns, but the gowns were made of linen, not of silver. They had gatlach, little rings, little girdles that ran around them, and these hooks. Okay? This is the Possuk. So the Possuk, I'm reading it again, verse Aleph, and the 1,000, the Shvameis, and the 700, the Chamisha, Veshiv, and the 75, also Avim Amud, and they made hooks for the Amudim. V'tzipur Hashem, and they made caps for their heads. V'chishakaisim, and they had a girdle, little rings that ran around it to decorate it. So it was raw wood of Eretz, it was cedar wood. It's translated in most commentators as acacia wood. And I figured they must have done something to preserve it from the elements. It wasn't just plain wood, it wouldn't have lasted. In other words, they treated it somehow. I don't know what kind of science they had in those days for treating wood, but they probably did better than we could imagine. And then they had these decorations of silver. This is what the Possuk says. And the next Possuk, Chavtes, goes on to say on the the copper. Okay? So on this Possuk, there's an interesting medrash. So we begin with the medrash, and the medrash, Moirei B'Rabosai, is on page 9. Now, page 9 and page 10 are both from the Sefer Shalah HaKadosh, from the Shaya Levi Horowitz, the Shalah. In 2 different places in his Sefer, he brings the same idea. Page 10 is from our Parsha. But page 9 is from the beginning of the Shalah. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Shalah. I suppose I wouldn't be going out too much on a limb to say that there aren't many of you who are very familiar with the Shalah. It's a remarkable Sefer, the Shalah. It's an unbelievable Sefer. Because you can't fasten it down. It has absolutely no limit in terms of its breadth. It discusses every level of Torah. It's unbelievable. It's full of halacha, it's full of Haggadah, it's full of Kabbalah, it's full of philosophy. There is not a part of Torah that's not represented in the Shalah. The only other Sefer that comes close to this is the Bnei Yissaschar, from the Dinevir. The Bnei Yissaschar, Tzviel the Melech of Dinah, wrote a Sefer, if you see his Sefer. Also, it's just packed, just so much stuff. The Shalah is a remarkable Sefer. It's a truly unbelievable Sefer. It was actually written for his children. It was not meant to be published. It was his will. And it was published. And they say that the publishing of the Shalah, which was not sanctioned from on high, had ill effects. He didn't suffer because of it. Because spiritually revealing such a gilui, the Gezeres of Tachvatat, 1648-49, corresponded to the publishing of the Shalah for the first time. And it's brought in Sfarim that they were not supposed to print the Shalah. The Shalah left a will, it's for his family. In his book, You read from time to time, he refers to his son in first person. I'm writing this for you and for you alone and so forth. The second time the Shlomo was printed was exactly 50 years later, but that year nothing happened. That's the year the Heilig of Baal Shem Tov was born. Shnas Nachas. And the Frierdiker Rebbe indicates that the birth of the Baal Shem Tov offset whatever ill may have occurred from the publishing of the Shalah. That's the implication in this sefer. But it's an unbelievable sefer. At the beginning of the Shalah, he has introductory essays where he goes through everything. You have theology, and you have philosophy, and you have musad, and you have common sense, and you have Allah. You name it. And then he goes through the whole calendar. You have Masechta Shabbos, and Masechta Psachim, and Masechta Rosh Hashanah. You can't imagine how much there is in this sefer. And then at the end, he goes through the Chumash, and then the Shas, the Klolim of the Shas. It's mamish, it's the whole Torah packaged into one book. It's so unbelievable. And it's also delicious to read. He's not difficult to read at all. And his entire book follows a pattern. The pattern of his book is Neir Mitzvah, V'Teira Eir, V'Derech Chaim. Everything he touches, he starts off with halacha, Neir Mitzvah, the law. Teira Eir, this is philosophy, usually mysticism. And Derech Chaim is Musar, a practical lesson. That's his style. It's very interesting. This is the Shalah Kodesh, the Holy Shalah, the great Shalah. All the Leviim, Horowitz, that you know, are his descendants, direct descendants. He was a Levi, his last name was Horowitz. There's thousands of Leviim, Horowitz, are all his Einiklach, including the great Hasidic Rebbes, the Chayzim Lublin, the Alter Rebbe had a Talmud about an Halevi, Strashela was also Horowitz, a Levi. The two brothers, Reb Shmelk and Pinchas, were Halevi, Leviim, Horowitz, Alt Einiklach and Hilik Shalah. He was a giant of giants, the Shalah Kodesh. The first page is from his introductory section, where he has an alphabet. He goes through each letter of the alphabet, and on each letter of the alphabet, he gives you a theme. So in Ois Nun, he calls it Ne'eman Ruach. It happens to be one of the most concise, one of the shortest essays. Most of them are much longer than this. Ne'eman Ruach, a person has to be transparent, honest. And he has to make it clear to everybody around him that he's upfront, that he's not duplicitous, he's not hiding anything. It also has a good midah toiva to be with integrity, to be open. And the same idea that we have on this page 9, which I took from the beginning of the Shalah, in a section of Musar, you have on page 10 from the Pashas HaShavua. If you look at page 10, you see at the top it says, Derech Chaim Techachas Musar. This is the last section of the Shalah, where he repeats almost verbatim the same idea, again teaching us in the context of the Parsha as opposed to in the introductory section, this lesson that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching us the idea of honesty and integrity and transparency. So let's go back to page 9, let's read it. The bottom of the first column on page 9. He's talking about this idea of having integrity and being honest. And he says, sometimes the person's honesty has to be transparent. It's in Alema, I mean to say that yare ne'emanusa, you should demonstrate, you should show off your honesty, neged kol ruach v'ruach, against all people, le'yachas edavar, you shouldn't conceal things. Ketz, for example. And I underlined it. You see, I underlined the whole thing. Im nismane panas alatzib. If a person was appointed a community leader, and of course, part of being a community leader is fundraising, taking people's money and using it for a specific purpose. To take people's money, whether by force or by request, you're soliciting money, you're raising money. Though you may know about yourself personally that you have great integrity. The world considers you a person of beyond doubt. You're a trustworthy person. No one's asking you for any cheshbonis. They trust him that he's honest and he has integrity. Nevertheless, it's a good midah that he should nevertheless be transparent and give them a precise cheshbon, bediktuk afilu bepachos mishava pruta, even about less than a penny. Who then is greater than our Moshe Rabbeinu? And he brings our Possuk. Because on this Possuk there's an interesting medrash, and we want to explore this medrash on many layers. There's a lot. I think this medrash goes deep and deep and even deeper. Okay, V'ne'eman, he was trustworthy. Shehei Delav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Almighty testified about him. Now look where I'm starting. It's not from the top of the second column, but from the middle, because I cut and pasted. This is two different pages. This is the bottom of one page to the top of the next. So from here, the Eibusha says about him, B'chol Beisi Ne'eman, I trust him implicitly. Afal Pikein still. Isa b'Medrash, the Medrash tells us, Shegomar Melechas HaMishkan, when he finished making the Mishkan, Amalehem Yisrael said to the Jewish people, Boyu v'nasa cheshbon l'fnechem. Let's do a calculation. Let's do an accounting. Like I said, it's 6 weeks from April 15th. Let's do an accounting of expenditures. Nichnasu kol Yisrael etzlei. The Jewish people came, v'amalehem Moshe, and Moshe starts to calculate. Eile pekudi ha-Mishkan, Mishkan ha'edut ha-shapoket al pi Moshe v'gemet. Kach v'kach yotzal ha-Mishkan. So much was expended on the Mishkan. Now, understand that the question that I raised earlier becomes extremely significant. Was Moshe Rabbeinu giving an accounting of how much money he raised? Or was Moshe Rabbeinu giving an accounting of how much money was actually put into the Mishkan? In other words, it's conceivable and quite reasonable that they raised much more gold, much more silver, and much more copper, and that the accounting is simply a reflection of the expenditures of the Mishkan proper. You understand? So therefore, because of this medrash, a lot of commentators are inclined to say that this was the amount raised. They didn't raise 1 penny more. The money collected was precisely what they needed. And these numbers that the Chumash gives, 29 kikar plus change of gold, and 100 kikar of silver plus change, and 70 kikar plus change of copper, that's all they raised. There was no more money raised. If you remember from last week's Parsha, it says in the Chumash, they made an announcement, please stop bringing. We have no more use. We don't need it anymore. So people stopped. So this medrash changes in effect significantly based on how you interpret the psukim. Is Moshe Rabbeinu telling us how much they raised, or is Moshe Rabbeinu telling us how much they expended? But it's immaterial for us. Let's continue reading. Zag der medrash im shiyeshev u'machashev. Moshe is sitting and tabulating. Shachach, and Moshe forgot. Elef u'shvameis v'ayin hei shekel. Moshe forgot what he did with the leftover silver. He forgot. How Moshe Rabbeinu forgets? That's a great question. And perhaps as this class unfolds, we'll be able to explore it, not on a pshat level, but on a mystical level, because the Kabbalah of this Possuk is mamish mind-blowing. But whatever the case is, Moshe forgot. And he's sitting there. He says, we raised 100, 300, and 1,775 silver coins. It's 100 kikar of silver we invested in the Adonim. And the rest, he couldn't remember. So the Medrash, Hischel Yeshev Etaya. Moshe became very bewildered and nervous. Omar, he said, Achshav Yemu Yisrael. You're not going to say Moshe Natan Lasa, Moshe took him. I mean, it's a joke. Moshe Rabbeinu, 175. They're talking about millions and millions of dollars. They took 50 cents. But still, Hey HaKadosh Baruch Hu was enough. So the Eibishter illuminated the eyes of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he saw them asuyim vav amudim, made into the hooks for the amudim. And Omar Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Ves elef v'shvameis v'geimin os vav amudim." In other words, the Medrash dramatizes this Possuk. It didn't just happen. Moshe was just giving a calculation. He forgot, and the Eibishter is mara enough. Other Midrashim, different versions, some of the Midrashim say that a heavenly voice came out and announced, this is what we did with the leftover silver. Moshe forgot, and a voice came from heaven. And of course, the point that the Shalah wishes to make from it is, if Moshe Rabbeinu was so concerned to give a precise tabulation down to the nickel, notwithstanding how much trust he had, we should certainly have that kind of responsibility if we're in public service. Right? And he says 2 lines later, if Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom masakach, if Moshe Rabbeinu bent over backwards to give precise calculations, Mayasu Azuvi Akir, what should we do? Who are little pieces of grass climbing, growing on a wall. This is the Shalah. So we just learned a medrash that adds drama to a absolutely benign Possuk. The Possuk is just calculating what they did with the silver. It says the medrash Moshe was dramatic. Moshe forgot. According to the version we just read, Hashem opened up his eyes. So you remembered, according to other versions, a heavenly voice actually announced that was done with the remainder and so forth. This is the medrash. Okay? The next item on our agenda is the Alshich. And the Alshich is on page 8. And the Alshich actually gives a very pshat. Notice, there's no Rashi. There's no Rashi on this Possuk. There's no Rashi on this Possuk. There's no Ramban on this Possuk. There's nothing. The only commentary I found in the Chumash itself is the Eir HaChaim. We're going to get to the Eir HaChaim HaKadosh next. Okay, in other words, we're dealing with a Possuk in Chumash that the classic commentators that we use every week have nothing to say. But trust me, there's so much. The Alshich makes a very, very simple observation. And he says, what's the point of all this enumeration? The point is very, very simple. It's impossible to take metals, melt them down, and reshape them without a loss. It's impossible. There's no way you can start out with 100 coins of silver, melt them and make them into a spoon, and it'll weigh 100 coins of silver. It's impossible. It just doesn't happen. There'll be a loss. How much? Half a coin of silver, a coin of silver, 3 coins of silver. That the final product should be precisely the same weight as the initial product is simply impossible. It's not about people stealing. It's about the process. And the Alshich establishes, as a matter of fact, that the whole point of this Pasha is to teach us the Nes of the Mishkan. Because the Alshich does not necessarily hold that the amount raised was the amount expended. In other words, they may have raised more gold than 29 kikar plus, they may have raised more silver than 100 kikar plus, they may have raised more copper than 70 kikar plus. Because the cheshbonos, according to the Alshich, are not to demonstrate integrity, they're to demonstrate the Nes. We use this much gold in the Mishkan, that's how much gold there is. We use this much silver in the Mishkan, that's precisely how much silver there is. There is no loss in the process of refining and remolding and so forth and so on. And the same is true of the copper. That's his approach to the entire series of Psukim. And we'll just read a little piece on the right side about gold, okay? On the right side of your page, you'll see I decorated it a little bit. This is the point of all the subsequent Psukim, Kol Hazav, Ha'asoi, V'goyim, V'kloimer. Sha'azav, Ha'asoi, U'mezuman, L'malacha. The amount of gold that they needed, that was set aside for the work, precisely that amount, that's how much they found in the final product. There's no way a person in the metal business can do this. That you invest a certain amount of gold and you get precisely the same amount of gold out. It cannot be. There has to be some loss. And that's the meaning of the word Melechas HaKodesh. It wasn't only gold, holy coins, it was holy work. Holy work means there was no deficiency at all. V'zehu Emri HaKodesh. U'b'chein, and therefore, l'das hashir ein tzorech. You don't need to know how much came out in the end. Ki medias asher huna v'asher huna metchila. If you know how much was raised, in other words, how much was initially designated for that purpose, you automatically know how much it was in the end, because there is zero loss. Left side of the page, please. I underlined one line 2 times. Klal hadvarim. The essence of the Pasha is shehukra hahashgacha. It demonstrated the hand of God. You saw the miracle. That the precise amount invested was the precise amount extracted. Ve'emunas Moshe Rabbeinu v'shalom, as well as the integrity of Moshe Rabbeinu, as the Medrash told us, Le'ini HaKol, to the eyes of everybody else. And then he continues, V'se'elef, v'shvahameyes, v'chamisha, v'shivim, asa vavim la'amudim, v'tzibur Hashem, v'chishek oisam, gam ha'ida. The Torah continues to testify, Ke'se'elef, v'shvahameyes, v'chuli, asa vavim, shalaynema, we shouldn't say, sha'oisei ashir, that this amount, chosru b'meya hakikirim, lo v'kikal adam, if you are making 100 solid silver foundations, and each one weighs 3,000 gold coins. To think that in producing 100 such foundations, you should lose 1,775 coins is completely reasonable. It's a few pennies. So the Torah says the precision of the investment of silver was such that whatever was above the 300,000 silver coins that were needed for the Adanim was extant. It was still there. It wasn't lost in the process of melting it down and reforming it. It remained outstanding, and this is what it was used for. In other words, the Alshich's interpretation of our Possuk is, don't think they lost a little tiny fraction. It's approximately 0.5% of the investment in the silver of the Adanim. If an Adan has 3,000 coins, it's a little bit more than half of that. 0.5% of the silver invested in the Adanim, and it wasn't lost. It was preserved, and this is what it did for it. Shalai Nema, you shouldn't say. That this 1,775 coins of silver were lost. Chosr were lost. B'meya kikarim, in 100 kikar, which is a huge volume of silver. Lavai kikar l'adam, to create 1 kikar l'adam. Okay, but even such a minute amount, relative to such a massive amount, remained outstanding. And he says, this becomes the basis for proof for all the other instances, that were not melted in a refiner. And therefore, he doesn't need to count precisely the amount and the weight of all the other things used in the Mishkan. This becomes the basis for everything else. When he talks about copper, so they had 70 kikar and 2,400 coins, 2,400 coins of copper. He doesn't tell you how much went into the Mizbeach, how much went into the Adonim. He just says they used the copper for these purposes. The gold, he doesn't give us at all a division of distribution. Most of the gold was probably used to gild the walls, but he doesn't go into it. When it comes to the silver, he picks on the 50 cents, on the little tiny quantities. Says the Alshach, you know why? He's using silver as his model. Just as in the case of the silver, we know where every penny went. We know the same about the gold, we know the same about the copper. And when it comes to the wools and the wood and the other artifacts, other materials, he doesn't even mention them. Using these three as a model, we understand that the precise amount of investment was the precise amount withdrawn, which is not possible with Derech HaTeva, it's a nes. Right? It reminds me of an interesting thing that I love to share. It's a personal obsession of mine, I suppose. It's not a big deal, but in Parshas Mishpatim, we have the description of the conversion of Klal Yisrael, right? And it describes what happened. The Moshe Rabbeinu took the blood, he divided it in half, and he put them in basins. Half the blood he put on the Mizbeach, and half the blood he spread on the Jewish people. So there's a really weird Rashi. Rashi says, who divided the blood in half? And then it says, Ba malach v'chilke, an angel came and divided the blood in half. Maybe tell me who needs an angel. I mean, every woman in the kitchen has a mixing bowl, has a measuring bowls. You take it, oil is I guess is also pretty thick, like blood is, and you can measure half and half. What's the answer? Nobody's measurement is perfect. When the Torah says that they divided the blood in half, there wasn't one molecule more blood in one than in the other. Which human being can do it? The Torah is a malach. This is Torah. This is not just a storybook. The precision is 100%. The accuracy is exact. One of the ideas that's mentioned in the course of this discussion, they had 100 Adonim. Each Adon weighed 1 kikar. Could it be that one was a drop heavier, one was a drop lighter? Could it be that one was 3,001 coins, the other one was 2,999 coins? Because it's Torah and everything is precise, each Adon weighed exactly 3,000 coins of silver, now a drop more and a drop less. The idea is, the miracle is that when the Eibishter engages in measuring physical things, there isn't the normal loss, which is part of the physical world. The physical world is an inexact realm. And in an inexact realm, when you're melting silver, melting gold, melting copper, and reusing it, there's loss. The Eibishter was involved over here. And although it looked totally natural, there was what's called Malachas HaKodesh. There was a holiness in the work, and the result was that the precise amount of investment was the amount withdrawn. And that's the Alshach's emphasis here. It's not so much about Moshe Rabbeinu's integrity, but about the miracle of the hand of God, that everything should be precise, exact. This is the Alshach. Anybody want to make any comments? I suppose that's a no. Go back to page 2. We'll do Erechayim. Now, page 2. The Erechayim has 2 interpretations. Okay? The second interpretation of the Erechayim is exactly the same as the Alshach's. If you look at the left side of your page, I made an aleph and a beis in my unbelievable handwriting, which I sometimes can decipher myself. You see, at the top of the second column you have an aleph, and then further on the beis. The beis is the alshich. The Orach Chaim, however, makes it clear that he's of the opinion, he personally is of the opinion, that it's impossible to say that they raised this amount of gold, this amount of silver, this amount of copper. He says they raised much more. There was much more gold raised, much more silver raised, much more copper raised. The Torah is not describing how much they raised, but how much they invested. And the purpose for writing it is to say that the amount of gold, silver, and copper designated for the Mishkan is the precise amount they withdrew. There was no loss. As the Al-Sheikh just said. They invested 29 kikar and change of gold, 100 kikar and change of silver, 70 kikar and change of copper. That's the amount that you should measure in the final product and the result in the end. Okay? But his first pshat, which he disagrees with, I find very creative. So although the Chaim HaKadosh brings it and disagrees with it, we're going to bring it and celebrate it. Okay? Let's begin from the very beginning, which is the bottom of the first column, the very bottom of page 2. V'se'elef ha'shvav ha'gemer. Says the Chaim HaKadosh Pirush HaNesharim, the leftovers. They had 300,000 silver coins. They used that to make 100 adonim. And there was change. How much was the change? 3,550 half shekels, which equals to 1,775 complete shekels. But Azal Amru, and the Medrash tells us, we know this Medrash already because I read it with you, Sheshakcha. Moshe forgot it. And then when he remembered them, Amar, he said, Ves Elav Goymer, Heimi Masha Asu, Vovim the Goymer. They made from it the hooks and so forth. Top of the second column, top of the second column. There are rabbis who hold there was no additional silver raised besides for the half shekels. Now remember, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh himself is going to disagree with these Seivrim HaChachamim. But the interpretation that Orach Chaim provides, L'shitasam, and their opinion is quite creative. Yizbayir, you would explain, Oimer, when the Possuk says, V'sa Elef, and so forth, Azeh Eimer HaKos, the Possuk means to say, that Lefi Shematiru, since we know, Shetiv, the Shematiru, Pasakasef, Machas HaShekel, they should give a half shekel. Okay, V'chol Malachas HaMishkan, and the entire Mishkan, Loi Matzinu, Shetziv Hashem Ma'aseh Kesef, there was no other purpose for the use of silver, Zulas, besides for Hadanim, the base, the foundations. V'havovim, and the hooks, V'chashukeim, and the girdles that surrounded these beams, Ubiyit, and we know that Ba'adanim, the foundations of the Mishkan, needed a very large amount of silver per base. V'havovim, says the Orach Chaim, these hooks and these rings and these caps, Loi Hoidia Hashem Shiuram, the Eibush doesn't tell us the quantity. Remember last week's class? One of the observations which I really took advantage of, as it were, was the fact that nobody tells us the size of the kiyah. We know the size of the Arim, we know the size of the Shulchan, the Eibush gave dimensions. The kiyah has no size, no dimensions. Why? Because the size of the kiyah was not determined by the Eibush. It was determined by the number of mirrors, period. More mirrors, a bigger kiyah. And we discussed last week that this wasn't just a technical thing, a happenstance. It was a mystical thing. It has to do with the distinction. What was the difference between the water basin and the rest of the kelim? The kiyah reflected the level of the Jewish people. The rest of the vessels, to use Kabbalah form, which I discussed last week, are pnimius hakelim, the inner aspect of the vessels. Godliness is going to rest in those vessels. The Eibush that tells you how to prepare his vessels. The kiyah was about our access to godliness, not about God's access to the world. We make those mirrors. We decide how much access to godliness we're going to have, and therefore the Eibush doesn't fix the size of the kiyah. More mirrors, a bigger water basin, more godliness. It's determined by Yidden. In other words, there's depth, there's pnimius to the fact that Hashem doesn't measure the kiyah for us. Because the kiyah reflects the level of Yidden. We have to measure it. So here, the Orach Chaim makes a similar observation. How much silver was needed for these hooks? How much silver was needed for these caps? How much silver was needed for these girls? We don't know. But Tzal made a very simple cheshbon. God is the master of the world. God is the master of the Jewish people. God is the architect of the Mishkan. God told us to raise half shekels. I know exactly how much silver to use. Whatever I have available, that's all. More Jews, more decoration. Fewer Jews, less decoration. It reflects Yidden. The Eibush doesn't say how much silver to use for these caps of these beams. The Eibush doesn't say how much silver to use for these hooks. The Eibush doesn't say how much silver to use for these rings. The existence of the Jewish people determines that. It happened to be 1,775 silver coins worth of silver available for the 100 beams. So you can do the math, you can figure out how much each beam, how many silver coins was available for each beam. You have to divide 1,775 by 100, so it becomes approximately 75 and 3/4 silver 17 and 3/4 silver coins of silver for each individual beam. You have to divide it by 100, okay? But the pnimius of it, the neshama of it is, B'Tzalel says to himself, the Eibush that is telling me that the remaining Jews, the number of the remaining Jews above 600,000, they determine the silver that decorates the Chatzir. And I believe, I'm allowing myself to believe, that the pnimius, the neshama of this is to say that there are certain aspects of the Mishkan that does not reflect the lakus, but reflects the Jewish people. Just like last week's kiyah reflected the number of mirrors, this week's, in other words, the number of women who gave their mirrors, this week's silver reflects the number of Yidden above 600,000 whose half coins went into this investment. It's a reflection of the condition of Yidden, and not the Eibush does need to have a place to manifest. So let's read it inside, okay? Okay. V'havovin, I'm reading the second column, 5 lines from the top. V'havovin, and these hooks, loy, hoidia, Hashem, shiurim. Hashem didn't tell us the measure. Now you're going to say, well, you forgot it, you overlooked it. Well, it's only a details. There's no such thing as details in the Mishkan. The Eibush that gives you measurements down to the handbreadth. He doesn't tell you how much silver was invested in these beams. Okay, and how much was used for hooks, and how much was used for the caps, and how much was used for the girdles. Lazen is chake B'Tzalel. So B'Tzalel allowed himself creativity. And he understood the following. V'cholak hanishar b'ha'adanim, whatever was left over after the 100 kikar from the foundations, v'asa and vav, he made from the entire volume hooks. God never said how much silver should be invested. Nevertheless, since God told him how much silver to invest in each piece of the foundation, his skila, he understood, all the remaining silver has to be invested in the hooks and in the girdles and in the caps. The Possuk is telling us, this means that the entire outstanding volume of silver, whatever was left over above the 100 kikar, B'Tzalel invested. Again, the reason I'm so excited about this interpretation of Chaim HaKadosh, because it's consistent with the Ibn Ezra's observation last week. This is an aspect of the Mishkan which is determined by the number of Jews. It's not determined by what Hashem needs as a place for His manifestation. The Kalim were modeled to be B'dugma Shel Maila, to reflect what's happening in the heavens, so that Hashem's Shekhinah could manifest. Not the Kiyah. The Kiyah was a reflection of Jewish women. And the size of the Kiyah and the effectiveness of the Kiyah, and as we learned according to Hasidus, the purpose of the Kiyah was to give us access to godliness. You missed Tuesday night's class. That the Kiyah was modest, it was a looking utensil, which allowed Yidden to see. It's a beautiful Hasidus. The silver caps and the silver girdles and the silver hooks were reflection for the remainder. How many Yidden above 600,000? See, according to Kabbalah, there are always 600,000 Jews. You know, the famous Kuzri who says that there never was a generation where there were fewer than 600,000 Jews giving over the same message. Today there are 30 times that, or 25 times that. There were times that there were many more Jews. But there's never less 600,000. 600,000 is a core number. According to Kabbalah, there's 600,000 souls. So anything above 600,000 are secondary, as it were. They're like begottens. They're branches of the 600,000 root souls. At that time, there were 603,550. Those 3,550 were really not separate souls. They were branches of the root, of the core, 600,000. The Vovim and the Chashukim and the Tzipuyim were made from the Neshamis that are beyond the initial 600,000, which is the core of the Jewish body, the foundation of the Jewish body. Go ahead.
It just seems different from last week, because that felt more like it was something they gave, like out of, just they poured it from their hearts.
Right.
Here it seems like numbers.
It's true, but it's Vestach. Macht es ha-shekel v'trashi kemin matbea shalish. A coin of fire. They gave like a half shekels, but this half shekel was l'chaper al nafshi sechem. It had to atone for the Igel HaZohav. So it was a lot of kavanah in that little 50 cents. As they state. Right? It happens to be this week's Pasha Shekalim. This week we read Pasha Shekalim. Anyway, this is the Erech Chaim. Okay? Okay. Now, one more little piece of drush on page 10. This is the Lechem and Hashem, page 11, Lechem and Hashemayim. Up Shetel, from the Chidah, really worthwhile, really worthwhile, quite interesting. He gives a remez, the Chidah, of the cheshbon of 1,775 coins. These are like this. Ma'az kikar kesef, the 100 volumes of kikar, of silver, was mea brachas, the 100 brachas. Vese elef, the 1,000, Dr. Alufa shal Teira, this is the richness of the Teira, shenitna le'el of day, which was given after 1,000 generations. For those who do not know, that there's a medrash that says, there's a number of Hashem will say, that before the Eibusha created the world, there were 974 generations. There's two different guesses. One says 974, and the other one says 980. The two medrashim, we once learned it in one of the shiurim and explained the whole pnimis of it. There's a medrash that before the Eibusha created the world, there were 974 generations of neshamis, of rashoyim, that the Eibusha didn't create. Then you count 26 generations, and the 27th generation is Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Avraham was the 20th generation, remember? Till Moshiach was 10, till Avraham was 20, till Moshe Rabbeinu was 27. So, Vesa Elef is that the Torah was given after 1,000 generations. Although, physically, biologically, it was only 26, it was the 27th generation. But mystically, there were 974 generations that preceded creation itself. So the Elef means the Torah was given to the Elef David. Dov, it's a Possuk. Oh, you know where it is? It's in the Rebbe's capital. Dov tiva liyalev David. The Rebbe is going to take to 1,000 generations. And on that Possuk there's the Medrash. Not this year's capital, last year's capital. We say it every day in the morning. Heidel Hashem Kitev. Heidel Hashem Kitev Shmei. Dov tiva liyalev David. Shekoshes Avraham. Shvosel Yitzchak. It's capital Kof Hey and Tilm. It's also from Divrei Hayamim. The Rebbe is going to take it as 1,000 generations because there were 900 and so many generations before. So the 1,000 is an emes to the fact that it was given to 1,000 generations. V'sheva meyes and 700s up there. Elu tafshin halachas shenishtakhu. These are the 700 laws which were forgotten. There's different gears. Some say shleishis halachim halachas. He obviously has a different medrash. 700 halachas were forgotten. Ve'erzirem asnil bepapula. Asnil brought it back to his pilpul. There's a medrash that says when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, the Yidden mourned, and in the course of the mourning they forgot a lot of Torah. They became very, very sad. Remember, the whole Torah was oral, and it was very, very much, not just intellectual, but based on inspiration, on enlightenment. And they forgot, according to this medrash, that he's quoting 700 halachas. Osniel ben Kenaz was Yeshua ben Nun's successor. Osniel ben Kenaz was the first shofet, the first judge after Yeshua passed away. Osniel ben Kenaz was a half-brother of Kalev ben Yefuneh. They had the same mother, different fathers. Kalev married Miriam. And Kalev is the grandfather of David HaMelech. His half-brother was Knaz, was Osniel. In Chumash, Kalev is called Kalev ben Yefuneh Haknizi. In the Chumash, on one occasion, in Pashas Shlach, he's called Haknizi. They were half-brothers. Osniel ben Knaz was the first Jewish leader after Yeshua ben Nun. He was a genius, brilliant man, and he realized that so much Torah was lost, so he sat down and using pilpul, using analysis and mechanisms of interpretation, he brought them all back. So 1,000 goes on the 1,000 generations which the Torah was given. The 700 goes in the 700 halachas which were lost by Osniel ben Knaz, retrieved through pilpul, and then he continues v'hei v'shivim, and the other 75 are as follows: Heichum She'Teira, the 5 books of the Torah, V'shivim Ponim She'nadreshes Bohem, and there's 70 different ways in which the Torah is interpreted. It's Aremes, that's all it is. 1,000 generations, 700 halachas which need to be retrieved, the 5 books of the Chumash, and the 70 different levels in which it can be interpreted. And from this, they made Asavavim Lamudim, they made hooks for beams. What does this mean? He's Amir the Kavart. He says, Kleimed Lamudei Shamayim, the pillars of the heavens. There's a Possuk that says, Sheikov Amudei Sheish, that the Eibishter has erected the earth on 6 pillars. The world stands on pillars, or 3 pillars. Teira, Aveda, Gnos, Chasadim. In some places it says Teira, Eretz Al-Balima, that the earth is hanging on nothing. But there's Psukim and Midrashim to the effect that the Teira is hanging on beams. What does it mean, beams? What supports the Teira? Yiddishkeit. What supports the Teira? Al Shleisha Dvarim Ha'ila Meimed, Al Teira, Al Aveda, Al Gnos Chasadim. He says, Shadem as the process is if not for my covenant, not for Yiddishkeit, Yemam V'Layla, day and night. Chukes, Shemayim V'Aras, the laws of heaven and earth was something I would not have placed. And these hooks are hooks to the beams that hold up the world. In other words, the remez, according to the Chida, is that the Torah, which was given after 1,000 generations, and 700 of its laws had to be brought back to us, Neil ben Naz, and it has 5 Sfarim, and 70 interpretations, is the support of the beams that hold up the world. That's how we interpret it. And then he says, Vaiter, V'tzipar Hashem, and he covers their heads with silver. The caps of these, the heads of these beams were covered with silver. Remember? So he has a very interesting pshat. He says like this: Klaimer, this means Kisa v'helim min ha'ilam. He covers and hides from the world. Roshei parshit smuchos, those with the heads of the parshits are near one another. It's the famous Maimon Chazal. The Chazal tell us that the Torah was not written in order. Now there's an order to the Torah, but not the original order. Because the Medrash says if we knew the proper order of the parshas of Torah, we could create a world. If we knew the order of the original Torah, we'd be able to create our own world. So the Eibush to mix them up. So he covers the heads of the parshas, the heads of these beams. In other words, he covers the heads of the order of the parshas. I'm reading the words inside. Sheimhayu yedim sidra shal Torah. If we knew the original order, this is a medrash. V'shemes yetziven, and the many godly names that come from this order. Hayobeinim elmas machriv and elmas. They could create worlds and destroy worlds. So the Eibush closed it. So the hooks on these beams represent supporting the beams that hold up the world, which is the Torah, and the silver caps on these beams conceal from us that we shouldn't know the proper order of the Torah, which would allow us to create and destroy worlds. And guess what? I have plenty of material for Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So Mitzvah Shem Tuesday night, I prepared a whole other class for Tuesday. So Tuesday night we're going to do a Zohar, a Megala Amukas, and then the Alter Rebbe's mind, the Alter Rebbe's Ketz. I always wanted to learn it, and in your honor I learned it today, and we'll learn it again on Tuesday. Go ahead.
The top of the Mizbeach was covered?
The Mizbeach, which one? The outer Mizbeach?
The temple. It was covered, the top, or it was...
You're talking about the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash? The building was covered. The courtyard wasn't, but the building was covered. Yes, with curtains, with skins, with wool and linen. The lower one was covered with wool and linen. The middle one was covered with fur, wool from goats, and on top of it there were animal skins, which were probably waterproof, for the record. Okay. Good. A good Nacht.